To teach genius, you must cultivate your own. If we're going to cultivate our own genius, we also have to think about the pursuits. And historically, let's just for a second think back to writing, access, privilege. Historically, not all races have had access to writing, to be able to voice their opinions, to be able to have input, to be able to produce in this written form. So we know that Essential 6 is a very, very, very important skill that we need to be teaching and coaching around. But if we think of it even beyond a skill, right, there becomes a moral imperative to provide our students with that access, with that voice. And also it challenges us to think about writing differently if we're struggling, right? If we're feeling like it's really hard to coach or teach around it. We owe ourselves that opportunity to grow our genius because we are worth it and our students are worth it. So I have the honor of introducing Dr. Lallier today. She has been an active part of our network, a researcher in our network, and she's so amazing to work with. And today she's going to share with us a tool that we talked about before at the Advanced Coaching Institute, but if you weren't there, that's okay. We're going to talk about it more today. It's just one tool that's going to help us get conversations going in classrooms about writing. It's going to help us look for writing in a positive way and build and grow off that. So after hearing Dr. Muhammad today, I hope that you'll see writing as more of a skill, and you probably have before, but it's just something that really resonated with me today. So Dr. Lallier, welcome.
Thanks, Lisa. I think it was a great setup for what we're going to talk about today. I'm just going to share my screen. Maybe I'll start at the beginning instead of at the end. It always works better. So as Lisa mentioned, we started talking about writing and what's happening in our schools at the Advanced Institute in August. Most of you were there, some of you were not. So just as a quick recap, and this is part 2 of what's happening in our schools. Dr. Duke and Dr. Wright during that Advanced Institute gave this really wonderful background about why writing is so critical. Dr. Duke talked about how writing is included in our essentials and not just in Essential 6. In fact, I think she went through and showed how you could see writing in each of the other 9 essentials. Even if the word writing wasn't in the essential, there was some connection to writing in each essential. And then Dr. Wright talked about how writing is critical for learning and equity. And I think first, if we go back to the essentials and think of Dr. Muhammad's pursuits, certainly we're talking about skills, but there's also a lot of identity in the essentials about having students have choice in what they're writing, choice in topics, choice in genre, and the joy of sharing that with their peers. But then Dr. Wright talked about how it's critical for learning and equity throughout life. In school, that writing helps support learning in content areas, so it gets to that intellect part, intellect pursuit, and again, the joy of sharing new knowledge about content areas, social studies, science, whatever, with your peers. And then outside of school, you need writing for personal communication, but maybe even more critical is the writing that we use for civic and workforce participation, that everybody needs to be on an equal basis for that in order to have productive civic and workforce participation. And certainly that there is joy in writing when people write for their own pleasure. Dr. Wright also shared with us that 2/3 of 8th and 12th grade students scored at or below the basic level on the NAEP writing test. And remember that the basic level means you just partially have mastered the skills for that grade level. So there's a lot of work to be done in terms of writing instruction and understanding the reading writing content area connection. And in August, we presented this paper and pencil type of writing instruction observation so that you could start going into classrooms and really getting a handle on what writing looked like in classrooms. And we encouraged you to look across content areas as well as just within writing instruction or reading instruction for reading. So these were some of the things we asked you to think about, to observe in classrooms more than once at different times of the day. We did say probably you didn't need to discuss your observations with teachers at this point, but as you'll hear later, many of our coaches took the opportunity to discuss some of those observations. Sometimes teachers are saying, what'd you see? And this is an excellent opportunity to share what you saw and to have a good discussion about it. We encourage you to analyze the data, to look for similarities across grade levels, within grade levels, maybe looking for unique cases where you saw that writing was really aligned to the essentials so that those places could serve as models for others. Those teachers could co-facilitate some professional learning in the future. And also looking for those unique cases where maybe writing was less aligned to the essentials, knowing where you may need to give more support in terms of your coaching time and effort. And we talked about thinking about you could use the data to draft goals related to writing for your coaching and goals related to writing for the schools. So meeting with the principal and building leadership team. And we said that we would move forward today to share some observation data and to think a little bit more about writing. And so we're going to do that. But first, I really want to share with you, we moved from a paper and pencil version and working with Michelle Wagner from Wayne Risa, we have put together now an electronic version that really simplifies these observations. And so I would just like to, I'm going to stop share this and I'm going to move into a live version so that we can see it. So if you look along the bottom of this electronic version that can be put onto your phone or your tablet as well as on your desktop, you can see that you can make observations in any grade level. Just pick the grade level you're going into. I also want to point out that there are tips for using this, and there are video instructions, 8-minute video instruction about how to complete this and some cautionary tales. So typically you have to enter the date and the teacher's name, the length of the writing activity, about how many minutes, and so these are all on drop down. Oops. Let me go back to sharing what I thought I was sharing. Let's try this again. So these are drop-down menus where you can just pick the time. And there's drop-down menus for the writing instruction based on everything in Essential 6 and some additional things that you suggested last time. And then there is an opportunity for you to make a description of what you saw and the alignment to the essentials. Should you keep it? Should you ignore it? Should you strengthen it? Should you revise it? All of those things that we talked about last time. And then if you say it should be strengthened or revised, how to strengthen or revise it. I think the other interesting thing about this electronic piece is that it has a summary page now. So at the very top of the summary page is all of the different kinds of writing that are on the observation list, how many times they occurred in each grade level, and the totals across grade levels, and how many minutes across grade levels there were spent on each of these writing activities or instructional practices. But then further, if you're interested, if you want to break it down, if you're just looking at kindergarten or first grade, you can break down and see how many instances there were, if these were things you wanted to keep, strengthen, revise, or ignore, and it gives you an overview by grade level. This is the page that you could download and share with the principal to show what's happening in instruction at this time. So I will put this into the agenda. It is a template so that when you open the template, it will just be yours, and you could open it multiple times and name it different things if you're doing different schools. There's some flexibility there. So I'm hoping that the electronic version will encourage people who haven't been able to get in to make observations yet to get into and make those observations now. But really what I want to do is to hear from your colleagues about how they've used the observation tool, either paper or pencil or electronic. And we have 4 people who have been using it. I'm sure there are more, but these are just people that we knew. Erin Hedrick from Muskegon Area ISD, Julie Bork from Grosse Pointe Public Schools, but she is a coach on special assignment with Wayne Risa right now. Sherry Mazeski from Muskegon Area ISD, and Shelley Antelak from Huron School District, but she also is a coach on special assignment with Wayne Risa right now. So we're going to start by hearing from Erin, and I'm going to stop sharing. And if you want to actually see people, you might want to switch to speaker view. So Erin, you can have a few ideas to share with us about your first experiences using the electronic version, right?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Erin Hedrick from Muskegon ISD, and I was fortunate enough to be able to use this tool and kind of see how it worked. The first thought was, as many of you are saying in the chat, this is amazing and it's going to be a game changer. Everything is laid out so nicely. And then once you look at the data, again, it just confirms that, because everything is organized so nicely in the data and it's so easy to look at. So what I did with the tool is I was using the paper version, and it was kind of hard to take notes because there's only small spaces. So that was really nice. The computer version, the spaces open up just like a regular spreadsheet, so you can take as many notes as you want. I did take my laptop into one of the classrooms, but I found it was easier to just kind of take my own personal observation notes, like just in a notebook, and then right after I was done, go back and go into the spreadsheet and record my notes, just because I like to be so engaged with the students and see what they're really doing and the teacher. And I just want to make sure I'm paying attention to everything that's going on in the class. But it was a really simple tool to use and plug in all that information. I was really interested when I started looking at the data and when I started actually really reflecting on what I would suggest for a change in teachers is some of the things that I was thinking about. Like, it surprised me that how much time in writing, whether it's writing during writing time or responding to reading or in social studies, how much time the teachers are taking out of that compared to how much time the students are actually writing or engaged with peers or engaged in the writing activity. And that was one thing that I thought might be good for the spreadsheet, is maybe like teacher instruction compared to students actually involved in the process. So those are some of the things that I kind of noticed about the spreadsheet. It's a very useful tool, and I did enjoy getting into it and being able to use it. So much easier than the paper tool.
So Erin, did you see more writing than you thought you were going to see?
I did, and I was able to kind of make some of those, I was able to use this in other places, because sometimes I would go into like a social, like teachers invited me in to watch writing through social studies and writing through math. And so it was kind of interesting when I put it out there, I can watch it wherever you're integrating it. And so to be invited into those math classes, and this is how we do it here, here's how we're integrating it into social studies. That was nice to see. Some of the teachers asked for the paper form before, just to know kind of what I was doing and what I was looking at. I did tell one of the teachers who was kind of calling it an evaluation tool that those last columns, if you would strengthen it, change it, those would be like our talking points, not necessarily how I would change it, but how she would change it or how she would strengthen it. And that was kind of, those would be our coaching focuses instead of my evaluation of how I would do it. So
well, that's really an important point for us all to think about, how we would share that with teachers, because we're always talking about the importance of having teachers know exactly what we're doing, and mentioning that strengthening and revising might be talking points is so important, I think. So we're going to ask Julie then to talk a little bit about it, in the fact that she was able to, I believe, collect data across schools. So Julie, can you talk just a little bit about what you did?
Absolutely. So, and I was looking at some of the questions in the chat, and I think I'll be able to answer some of them from my perspective. But because I visit multiple buildings, I sent out an invitation to first grade teachers. That's who, although I work with K-3, I just had a large group of first grade teachers that I've already been working with. And I kind of prompted it by saying, I have this new tool that I'd like to try out. I showed them like a screen grab of the electronic copy and asked if it was okay if I came in to try it with them. When I sent that email, actually all of them responded and gave me a time to come in. So I didn't end up popping in on anybody. And the time they gave me was their writing instruction block. So for this kind of initial attempt at using the tool, I really only saw them doing writing during their writing instruction while using the tool. Excuse me. I did bring my laptop in. And when I brought my laptop in, I recorded my notes right on my laptop. I was originally thinking I would try it on my cell phone. But when I pulled up the sheet on my spreadsheet on my cell phone, it's just a little small for me. And I was worried that teachers might think I was just texting or being distracted with something else. So I ended up bringing in my laptop, which that had its pros and cons too. I think teachers are used to like admins bringing in their laptop. So like to Erin's point about a teacher thinking about this as an evaluation tool, with the teachers I went into, most really had no problem with it. But there was one who, seeing the laptop made her feel nervous afterwards. So I think like if I had access to a tablet, I think that'd be like a happy medium. I don't. So my thought was like, I could just have taken notes. And when I was done, I could have inputted it very easily into the spreadsheet. and collected the data that way, just to make it a little less stressful for them. But since I do support multiple buildings, I just used the spreadsheet as is and coded the teachers a little bit differently when I put in the teacher codes based on what building they're in. For my initial attempt using it, I didn't want to play around with the spreadsheet too much. I wanted to kind of keep it as is. But I think if I were going to use it again, it'd probably be helpful for me to either have a different one for each building so that I could use that summary page with principals, but also have a district one, because our district curriculum coordinator was really interested in what I was finding out with the data. And I know that he would have liked to see across buildings what was happening. And I think that could have been used. You know, writing is just not one of our focuses this year, unfortunately. You know, we all have our opinions on how it should be, but it's unfortunately not. So I think that would help him see why it might be an important area for us to focus on in the future and to collect that data. Because I went in during their writing time, I really only saw a couple of the examples from the drop-down menu, but I'm sure that if I had been able to pop in, just knowing what I know about the classrooms in my district, there would have been a different sample to present. So I just think in general, it was a very easy observation tool to use. It gave data and information very quickly, taking those notes about what you saw and the keep, strengthen drop down was also really helpful because it kept me thinking about the essential rather than just like general observations about writing. So I thought it helped to keep the conversation very focused. And some teachers asked afterwards, and I talked with them, and some teachers didn't. In my initial outreach, I had said, I'm just trying here to try the tool, not to necessarily do an observation on your writing instruction. And some teachers just left it at that. And other teachers were like, well, I know you're just using the tool, but what do you think? And so then we were able to have a conversation.
So I often love the way that you can get into teachers' rooms by saying, I have to try out something new. And then, as you say, you're always going to have those curious teachers with whom you can have those conversations and lead to more intensive coaching. I also think that as you are making observations about many other things in classrooms, it's a good idea just to always keep in mind, like, oh, if I see writing, I might take a written note about that and add it to the writing observation. So you're not specifically going in to observe writing, but you're just catching writing whenever you're observing. So I think that's really helpful. Sherry's going to talk to us a little bit about the fact that, yes, she did use the tool and then how she actually used it with a group of first grade teachers.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Sherry Mazeski, and I am a school-based coach in a K-4 building in Muskegon County. And I had the opportunity to observe in a couple kindergarten, first and third grade classrooms. I started out with my observation in the kindergarten and third grade classroom. I recorded my notes after the observation, and I actually used the form that they had shared with us at that first quarterly meeting. I found it a little hard to type into that space. And then with the first grade teachers, I just went in and I had my laptop and I recorded my notes right as I was observing. So what I found, it was super easy to transfer the data that I had previously collected into this new form, which I found to be super, super user-friendly. There are several, I have my top 3 favorite features that I really want to share with you. And I was going to say they're in no particular order, but I am going to save my my most favorite feature for last. But I really appreciate the tabs at the bottom because it makes it super easy to, at a glance, look at my notes from my observations. So my kindergarten notes here, first grade, and then I was able to observe in third grade. My second feature that I really appreciate is this summary tab, because it does give you a good overview of all of the writing activities that you've been able to observe within the school. But I also really appreciate this feature where it breaks it down. So you can see in kindergarten, I was able to observe 3 teachers doing explicit instruction and letter formation. You can also see that while those 3 lessons were aligned to the essentials, they could be strengthened. So then in first grade, I was able to observe 2 teachers. Whoops, let me go back to the summary. Sorry. For first grade, I was able to observe 2 teachers doing a writing lesson, and they both started with daily oral language, which they call Daily Fix-It. So you can see that really is not aligned to the essentials. And then they also then went into, right after that, their writing lesson, and you can see that it was aligned to the essentials, but it could be strengthened. So the nice thing is I can go back to that first grade tab and I can really look at my notes and I can see all of the really good things those teachers were doing that are already aligned to the essentials. But then that brings me to my third and most favorite part, is this ideas about strengthening and revising the lesson, because it allows me as the coach to be really reflective and to really think about ways to ground this work in the essentials. I mean, I got my essential book out, and then it was kind of an afterthought to go back in and actually add the essentials in the bullets, because I started to see some themes. And really with this lesson that I observed this teacher doing, I noticed that that essential 1, that motivation and engagement, and really allowing students to have that collaborative writing time would be a conversation that maybe I would have with this individual teacher, or maybe it would be a grade level conversation. So this piece for me is the most valuable as a newer coach. I feel like it helps me go into those conversations that I'm going to have with teachers, being really intentional about the conversation, and really having meaningful conversations that lead to teachers strengthening their literacy practices. So then I will just share that one of the teachers asked me about the lesson, and I just kind of put it back on her. At first I said, well, how do you think it went? And that led her to share with me that she was really feeling frustrated because she didn't have enough time for writing. She felt like they were always running out of time. So I was able to pose the question about those fix-it sentences, because they were spending a good chunk of that beginning writing time on those daily fix-its. So I asked her if she was noticing any carryover in the students' actual writing from those skills she was teaching with fix-its. And she said, no, not really. And so through our discussion, she realized that she could probably get rid of those fix-its, because then I was able to share with her. I watched her having these beautiful writing conferences with her students, and she was teaching those skills. She was conferring with her students around some of those same skills that she was doing during daily fix-it. So what a much more meaningful way to teach those skills within their actual writing. And so that led to a grade level conversation. She brought it up to her grade level about the daily fix-its, and through their conversation, they decided that they could get rid of those fix-its and have much more time for writing. And through that conversation, I was able to bring up the Watching While Writing protocol, because I noticed during that observation that neither one of the teachers had been recording their conversations that they were having with students. And we had done extensive learning last year that are building around that Listen to Read and Watching While Writing protocol. So I was able to kind of tuck that in and just say, hey, that might be a good tool that you could use when you're having these writing conferences with your students, and really look at all the good things they're doing as writers, and then being able to use that to guide your planning for future lessons. And so it ended up being a really valuable, wonderful conversation. And I think that because I used this tool and I was able to really reflect on the observations and really think about ways that the lesson could be strengthened, not that it wasn't a great lesson, but just here are some ways that we can just really build in those essentials. It was powerful. So thank you for creating this. For people like myself who are newer to this position, it feels good to have this tool.
Well, thank you, Sherry. I think as somebody said, wow, one observation or two observations, one conversation leading to change at the grade level. It's really quite impressive. And I think that whole idea of we want teachers to be reflective, but we as coaches are reflective first so that we can carry on those collaborative conversations. You don't want to go in there without some concrete ideas that you might want to share with people, or bounce those ideas off of the teacher to see if they resonate with the teacher and with how she works with her students. So thanks for that great example, Sherry. And finally,
you.
we're going to listen to hear from Shelley Anteluk, who's going to talk a little bit about setting goals with the observation form. And she's from Wayne County RESA as well.
Hi, I'm Shelley Anteluk, and I am in Huron School District, and I'm at Brown Elementary School, which is 1st through 5th grades. So that's where I did my observations. And this was a perfect thing to pilot this year because we are working on our phonics goal this year. That's what's in place, and we gathered data on that previously. So now we know that next year we are going to focus on literacy essential number 6 that was already in place. And this year we were going to be gathering data about what our teachers are doing already that aligns with the essential or maybe needs some work. And we are looking at curriculum that would support good writing instruction. So this observation was perfect for us. I was able to go into classrooms, and also I did add a column on the tool where I wanted to know what curriculum they were using, because I expected to see that there was a variety of different curriculum they were using. So in a lot of cases that was Teachers Pay Teachers, YouTube, things that they have created for themselves. And I wanted to see how that looked in grade levels, and I wanted to see how that looked across grade levels. So really in my observations, I was able to see lots of good writing, and I was pleasantly surprised by how much did align to the essentials, but it was based on what teachers have developed for themselves, and it wasn't always the same per grade level. So for example, in 1st grade, where we have some real strong teachers, I saw some great instruction in writing that aligned to the essentials. And I did see some areas where we could strengthen. I almost always put strength in it because honestly, we could always strengthen whatever writing or reading instruction we're doing. So I always had some ideas, but the tool worked out great. I did lots of typing. I used my laptop. And it was perfect. And there was only one classroom that I went into. I lost my internet, so I had to go old school and get some paper out. So you've got to be ready for those sorts of things. And in 2nd grade, they were using a Teachers Pay Teachers, all new 2nd grade teachers. So I was really impressed by what they put together for themselves. But again, we have, just for an example, our 2nd grade students are working more like 1st grade students from the instructional loss that they've had. And so a lot of them I saw when they were working independently that they were asking the teacher to stretch words for them. So even though the teachers did some great modeling of writing, I didn't see them stretching words. And I think that's something that they needed to like drop down to model for their students, because that's what they needed at the time. So that would be an example of how to strengthen it. Our 3rd grade was an example of what I would see, what I was expecting to see. Across 3rd grade, I saw two examples that really aligned with the essentials, and they were awesome. They blew me away. And then 2 that weren't. So across that grade level, there was a lot of variety in what they were doing. And I think that is the example of why our writing instruction isn't where it needs to be. I was only able to observe one 4th grade and one 5th grade. The 4th grade example, the teacher, when she was giving the children time to work independently, she went to Fontes and Pinnell testing. And I know she was probably in a time crunch. So my suggestion would have been to give them some feedback in their writing and kind of guide that along. But the 5th grade was a really good example of aligning to the essentials. So basically, overall, what I learned was that we are doing some really great things with writing. We don't have a long way to go. They need they need to go through the essentials and understand what they're doing that's aligned and what is not aligned. And also they need some direction. Our framework needs some attention and then some coaching along the way. And I have full confidence that we would be able to do very well in writing. And this tool was perfect for guiding us along.
Thanks, Shelley. I appreciate all four of you sharing. And I think that Shelley's example shows that sometimes what a school needs is consistency across grade levels, and teachers need to have that opportunity to talk about what's working well and how we can be more consistent about that. So I'm encouraging everybody to make use of the writing tool. There are different paths you can take and just to kind of acclimate yourself to what's going on, to develop an awareness in the school actually about the importance of writing instruction. If you're observing writing instruction and you're talking about it with teachers, it's going to come more to the forefront. And also to begin that professional learning with individuals or grade levels. I believe, I'm just going to check to make sure we have the right one. Michelle, can you just cautionary tale about adding columns? If somebody is going to add a column to the electronic version, where should they add it so that it does not disrupt the formulas for the summaries?
It shouldn't, adding a column should not affect it at all. So as long as you
Okay.
add it to the right, you're fine.
To the far right is where they should add it.
Yep.
Okay, and we can't thank Michelle enough for working hard to develop this electronic version and putting in all the revisions that she and I discussed, and hopefully it'll work for you. So we encourage you to try it out